So weet jy hoor, wat is die Gansbaai gees hierso vanaand? Is julle hierso? As hy, goeienaand. Baie welkom by vanaandse vergadering. Welcome and thank you very much for attending. Baie dankie dat julle bywoon en julle volle glorie en in Gansbaai se gees. Ons is baie bly om julle met ons te hê. We are happy to have you here at this meeting and we look forward to your active participation. Kan ek dalk net hoor, voordat ons begin, hoe voer julle die begin van 'n vergadering? Is it okay to ask someone in the audience to pray for us? Is there someone that's willing to pray for us? Iemand wat ons dalk 'n gebed wil doen asseblief? Ja, nog iemand? Ja? Too shy. Right, can I? Not appropriate. Okay. Baie dankie ons wil. Yeah, we like to follow the protocol of the local community. So if you feel it's not appropriate, then that is 100%. So my naam is Antoinette Petersen en my rol vanaand is om die vergadering te fasiliteer op 'n regverdige manier. I hope to facilitate this meeting fairly tonight. And just before we start, a few safety precautions. In the event of an emergency, we will leave the venue as we've entered it and just gather here at the parking on the southern side, where I suppose most of you have parked, or meeste mense have parkeer. En so ek gaan so 'n bietjie afwissel tussen Engels en Afrikaans. Ek hoop dit is in orde met almal. En dan vra ons net dat as daar dalk enige mense is wat wapens het, dat julle net asseblief Steve vooraf daar agter sal gaan sien en dit net vir ons asseblief verklaar. If there are any weapons in the room, we just ask that you kindly meet up with Steve there right at the back from WSP and just declare any weapons that there may be in the venue. And we do this for the safety of our process and of our people. Van almal wat hier teenwoordig is. Goed, so net so 'n paar saakies. My rol is nie vanaand hier om te vra dat julle die projek ondersteun nie, die voorgestelde kernkragsentrale projek. En ek is ook nie hier om te vra om almal wat of diegene wat daarteen gekant is stil te maak. My rol vanaand is om seker te maak dat die proses verduidelik word. I'm here to make sure that the process is being explained clearly, that almal in staat is om hulle issues, hulle vrae te vra en hulle kwessies te opper, en dat dit wel korrek genotuleer word, so that make sure that everyone has an opportunity to raise their questions, their issues, and also that it is recorded adequately. So for that purposes, we are recording the meeting to make sure that we produce an accurate set of minutes of the meeting, and we will also make available the official recording on the website to everyone that is interested. Ons sal dit ook beskikbaar stel op die webwerf, ons datavrye webwerf waar ons bietjie later meer gaan deel, sodat julle dit toegang kan hê tot die amptelike opname van hierdie vergadering. Goed, so we also recognize that this is a high interest and for some a high emotion project, process and information, and that is 100% understandable. Dit is 100% verstaanbaar. Die projek het 'n geskiedenis, en mense het kommer uitgespreek en is bekommerd oor veiligheid Hulle is bekommerd oor vertroue, verskeie kwessies, ek luister nie noodwendig almal nie, maar erfenis, heritage, livelihood of fishers, local services, environmental sensitivity, and so forth. In work of the process genuinely open is, if this process is genuinely open. And this is the forum and the platform where you have an opportunity to raise those issues. And then may I please ask that you put your phones on silent so that we can have a peaceful meeting. If you do need to take a call, kindly take it outside of the venue. Dan net so vir 'n paar goedjies wat ek wil beklemtoon. This is a public meeting that is part of an environmental impact assessment process. It is not the meeting that decides whether the proposed nuclear plant will be built. It's not a referendum, and it's also not meaningless. This is an opportunity where you have a chance to raise your questions that can still influence the specialist studies, as well as how impacts are interpreted. And we want to make sure that process is ultimately run in a transparent and fair manner, as I've said earlier. So in terme van taal, soos jy by die taalkwessie kan kom, the main presentation has been prepared or is in English. I see that a lot of you do have copies of the presentation. They're available in Afrikaans, English, and isiXhosa, and they're also available on the website. And then there's also a background information document, the 2-page leaflet that you've seen, which is really a summary. En dan het ons ook wat ons noem 'n nie tegniese opsomming van die konsep omgewingsbestek verslag. Dit is beskikbaar op die webwerf en die datavrye webwerf. En daar's ook 'n audio van dit beskikbaar, so as jy dalk nie wil lees nie, dan kan jy luister na die opname van daardie dokument. So ek wil net seker maak of dit in orde is dat ons die aanbieding doen in Engels en dat die vrae en antwoord sessie plaasvind in die taal waarin u gemaklik is, soos u voel jy wil in Afrikaans vra, is u welkom om dit te doen, of isiXhosa of Engels. Ons kan 'n kortlikse opsomming gee in Afrikaans as daar dalk punte is wat klaarheid verg. Is dit in orde? Kan ek net sien by wyse van hande? Reg? Baie dankie. Goed, so laastens kan ek net ook 'n aanduiding kry van toestemming vir ons om van agteraf so 2 foto's te neem van die vergaderings vir ons prosesrekords. Is dit in orde met almal? Ja. Goed, as ons net kan aanbeweeg. Thank you so much. Ek wil net graag die span voorstel. I would like to introduce the team. So we have the applicant Eskom. From Eskom's side we have Deirdre Habst. Good evening everybody. We've got Sadiqa Tofi. Good evening. And we have Attila Els. Good evening, everybody. And then from the environmental assessment practitioner side, the people who do the impact assessment, WSP, the project manager, Ashley Strong.
Hello, everybody.
And we've got Tumela Mathuwe there at the back, Steve Wora. We've got Natasha Bakota, she's the lady that's helping us with all the registrations. And we have Tengo Dube, he is right at the back and he's available for any isiXhosa interpretation if necessary. So we can just move on to the purpose of the meeting.
Can you just introduce Maxwell as well?
Maxwell.
Yeah.
Maxwell, also from Eskom. Thank you. Maxwell, what is your surname?
Mustafa.
Mustafa. Thank you, Maxwell. Right, so meeting conduct and guidelines for constructive discussion. Net versoek dat dit is sou werk om sterk te voel oor 'n saak. En ek verstaan dat mense sterk voel oor 'n saak, maar kan ons dit asseblief met respek hanteer en let's treat each other respectfully and let's not become personal in this during this meeting. Ek gaan vra dat ons deur my werk as die fasiliteerder van die aand wanneer ons die vrae en antwoord sessie het en dat jy net asseblief jou naam en van sal sê wanneer jy jou vraag wil vra en alle vrae wat gevra word, kwessies en opmerkings gaan ons notuleer en saamvat in 'n kommentaar en 'n antwoordregister. Dit sal beskikbaar gestel word aan almal wanneer ons dit klaar alles vasgevang het. Goed, so baie dankie. Ek sien uit na die engagement vanaand. Ons gaan die presentation afhandel en dan gaan ons die vloer oopmaak vir vrae en antwoorde. Die agenda, ek dink ek het min of meer die agenda reeds verduidelik. Die doel van die vergadering net weer vir almal, I just want to confirm, this is the scoping phase of the environmental impact assessment. So it's the first phase, the second phase is the impact assessment phase. So this is really the start of the meetings where you have an opportunity to raise your issues and so on, as I've said. But importantly, we may not be able to address all the concerns and questions tonight, but we'll definitely take it back to our specialists for evaluation and assessment, and then feedback will be provided during the impact assessment phase. Right, I think we've got these posters up everywhere. There's a QR code. You can scan to register as an INIP, but you will be registered by default if you've completed the attendance register. It's not, if you sign the attendance register, you're not signing away your life. You're not giving your support to the project. It's simply for us to keep you abreast of progress and informed of opportunities to comment. Right, so there's different ways that you can contact the office. All of the information is on the slide in your presentation and it's also up on the walls. Please feel free to access the information. Then just regarding the websites, so the information is available on WSP's website, and there's also a data-free website, which is free of charge. You don't need Wi-Fi, you don't need data. You can scan the code, it's also up on the walls and in the presentation, and it will take you straight to the place where you can download the documents free of charge. Am I done now? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Over to Ash.
I think I go the front ways.
Yeah, let me advance.
We already have a bit of a tangle here, so let me go this front ways. I stand here. Can everyone on this side see the presentation? So if I'm in the way, please just let me know. If I'm talking too fast, must I move this out of the way for now?
Yeah, I'm going to move it up.
Okay, that's fine. If I'm talking too fast, just wave at me, and and if you can't hear me, just tell me to move the mic closer, because it does tend to droop as one gets through the evening. Okay, so let's start. It's not a very long presentation, and I will hand over to Eskom to do a few slides in the middle, so you won't have to listen to me the whole. All right. Okay, so why are we here? We are here to look at a proposed nuclear facility. That it is going to be a new facility. I'm sure all of you, well, not all of you, but some of you were involved in the previous process for what they call Nuclear One. That was authorized. The EIA started in 2006 and was authorized in 2017, and then went through some appeal processes, and the appeals were all dismissed, and the EA upheld in July of 2025. There's subsequently now a review of that as well, so there's still some legal things happening, but essentially that was for the Danafontein site, which is next door to Coburg. Coburg, you'll know, is a existing facility that Eskom has been running successfully for the last 40 years. And the Dana-Fontein site is located on neighbouring farms to that one. As part of this process, we are looking at the other two sites that are currently available for nuclear facilities, and we identified in the 80s as potential sites that ticked all the boxes in terms of the international requirements from the International Atomic Energy Association. They have a long list of tick box items that a site has to tick, and the Buttonsklip and the Tasman site tick those boxes from a siting point of view. So we are looking at those two sites, but we'll give you some more information on that a little bit later in the presentation. In terms of why nuclear, it's really pinned in government policy and plans, starting with the nuclear energy policy of June 2008, also underpinned by the National Development Plan, which also looks at youth needing to have a diverse and secure energy supply, including that of the use of nuclear power. And then last year, the Integrated Resource Plan that was published in 2025 is an updated plan from the previous plan, and which now also includes the need to look at nuclear and including it in the energy mix. Basically having with some baseload power stations of the coal variety are being looked at to be closed down in by 2030, if I'm not mistaken, and there needs to be a replacement baseload energy generation source, and it needs to be a carbon-free option, and that's where nuclear comes in as the baseload option for that, supported by the energy mix, including gas, wind, solar, etc. So all of those options are required in terms of the IRP or Integrated Resource Plan for the energy mix for the country. Right, let's move on to this slide, which just shows us sort of where we are seated in terms of this process versus other processes and applications that are required for the project. To show you that it is a complicated story. It's not just this process that needs to happen for the facility to be developed. We are one box, the green box, the environmental authorization, which is the one that looks at the impacts from an environmental point of view, not just biodiversity, social, heritage, economics, all of those included. We feed into the heritage permit. It's something that happens parallel and is done by our heritage specialists. In fact, they have put in the applications already. And that is something where we need comment as well from the South African Heritage Association, as well as the Eastern Cape Heritage Authority as well. So that happens parallel with the EIA and is also already started. Once the EIA is finished, should it be authorized, then Eskom will be able to go into the water use license application as well as the coastal discharge permit. But what we are doing to try and sort of look forward is that the studies that are included in the EIA will be used in those two applications. So it doesn't mean more studies will need to be done. These studies will be included and will support those when they're needed. The pink box on the right-hand side is the nuclear site license or installation license application, which is a completely separate process to what we are doing. It is done with the National Nuclear Regulator. It's a completely separate process, but it will also happen concurrently with what we are doing. And it will have its own public participation process as well, so you can also look out for that. Right. Something that's a little bit different for those who were involved in the Nuclear One process. Nuclear One EIA process started in 2006 and was authorized in 2017. In 2014, the EIA regulations changed completely. They implemented timeframes for the EAP ourselves. They implemented timeframes for yourselves as the public the implemented timeframes for the competent authority, in this case, which will be the Department of Forestry, Fishery and the Environment. So we now have timeframes that we have to sit with and work within. They are tight, I'm not going to lie. The previous process was undertaken over 10 years. There were no timeframes. There were no timeframes for EEP, there were no timeframes for public, there was no timeframes for the department. Now we have timeframes. So the scoping phase, we have as an EEP, we have 44 days from submission of application, which was the 1st of April, to the submission of the final scoping report to the department for their review. We have 44 days. Within that, we have to undertake a 30-day public review period and still incorporate all your comments and all the responses in the final report before the 44 days are over. We then wait 42 days for the department to give us a response on the scoping report and whether they agree with the recommendations in that report and whether they approve our plan of study to move into the detailed EIA phase. From the date of that approval, should it be approved, we have 106 days to submit a final EIA report. Okay. But there is leeway in the regulations for us to engage within the process. Once we're in the process, which we are in now, we are able to engage with the DFFE and request extra time for the EIA phase. All right. So that we can then allow extra time for the public to review the EIA report, which is the next report that we need to do. So we will be engaging the DFFE to request that. We have to get their approval before we can give the extra time. So we will be requesting that extra time for the next phase. Once if the extra time is granted, once we've submitted the final EIA report, which we're hoping will be in January of next year, the department have also a time frame that they have to work within to actually give us the decision, the ultimate decision. Eskom has applied and submitted the application to register this project as a strategic infrastructure project. If that is approved and granted, then the DFFE will have 57 days to review the EIA report and provide their decision. If the request for SIP status is rejected, then the DFFE will have 107 days to review and provide their input. So the timeframes are a key difference from the previous process that was run. But we do have some of the anticipated dates in here. We anticipate the next time you will see reports in the libraries will be September. Okay, so let's hope all goes well.
Sorry, Ash, just before you continue, I see that we do have a hand. I just want to acknowledge the hand, but I'm going to ask you to please keep the questions until after the presentation. It won't take that long. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of public participation, I think we've covered a lot of this already. We are trying to accommodate language, culture, different types of media, different modern ways of putting out the information, using websites, data-free websites, email, WhatsApp, etc. We are trying to accommodate as many languages as we can, English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, etc. We can accept comments, written form. You're welcome to phone and we'll write them down. We started with a database of 6,000 and it has subsequently grown to about 10,000 just before we started the meetings. I think we've grown some since then with the people that have attended the meetings that are not yet registered and will be registered in due course. So we really have tried to use as many different ways to make this known. You're welcome to still give us ideas of other options that we have that might be better for your community, that we can reach out and make sure that the progress and the way forwards, etc., and the reports are communicated. In terms of why we're doing an absolutely full EIA process, is because we trigger the listed activities in both the listing notice 1, 2, and 3 of the EIA regulations that are promulgated under the National Environmental Management Act. If you need to see if you would like to see the details of what the listed activities include, then if you go to chapter 7 of the scoping report, it's all detailed there. If you have any queries, you're welcome to contact us. I'd like to hand over now to Sadiqa. He's going to give you a couple of slides on the project description.
Thank you. Can I just ask with that specific microphone that you just keep it close to your chin and project because it sounds a bit soft here at the back.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Ashley. So I'll go through the project description just to describe in an outline of what the plant typically would look like, and highlight some key items of key infrastructure that comes with the construction of the plant. As you can see, this is just a cross-sectional diagram of the plant, laying out the typical large components, as well as the major systems that would be managing during the life of the plant during the operational phase. It really starts off with the chain reaction, nuclear chain reaction, where we have a neutron impacting a uranium atom and splitting that up. It generates heat, it splits the atom, it generates heat, and it generates another neutron, which then goes on to impact the next and subsequent uranium atom, and that's what we call the chain reaction in the fission process. The heat that's generated is what we use in the reactor itself to heat up water under pressure, and in terms of a pressurized water reactor, and that we use to control the chain reaction in the reactor. And it's in a primary circuit where the water is circulated and pressure monitored, and it's cooled off in the steam generator. The steam generator has two important functions. The first one is cooling off the water in contact with the reactor, so that water is pumped back cooler, gets heated up in the process, comes back to the steam generator, cools off, and returns through to the primary circuit around that. The next important bit about that is the steam generator is used to generate steam, which is used to drive a turbine, which drives the generator and produces electricity, which then gets onto the transmission network. The water is cooled off in the condenser and fed back through to the steam generator to repeat that process. The water in the secondary side is what we call, this circuit is not in contact with the water in the primary side that touches the reactor fuel itself. That is cooled off by a third cycle of water where we use seawater to cool off the water in the condenser, and that's independent of, again, the primary and secondary system, and cools off the water, and that goes out to the sea. Around that, it's controlled by the control room, and the operators do manage this process quite safely and quite continuously in the process. The main components here is what we have the reactor building itself. It's encased, and this is our nuclear island where the reactor vessel, the major nuclear safety components are located in the containment structure. Next slide, please. This slide just typically shows you pictorially what the pictures does look like and how they translate into it. There will be various works that will be built and constructed and managed during both construction as well as in operations. In the construction phase, we will have some ocean works where spoils typically return back to the sea in terms of excess sand, and that will be subject to what the environmental study that shows will come through from that. But there will be an intake structure and an outflow structure in operation where we will draw seawater for cooling of the secondary side, as I mentioned before, and the critical components to use cooling on that. There will be the nuclear island, and that houses all the key critical nuclear components, like the reactor vessel, the pressurized and the steam generators, and critical safety components. And those are contained within normally a meter-thick containment building of reinforced concrete. And it's on the nuclear island, so that is protected from various different elements and the like. Linked to that will be the power block where the generators and turbines are housed, and that connects through to the electrical side of the infrastructure, through to the transmission network where the power gets evacuated to the national grid around that. On site will also be cooling tanks, water tanks, water storage tanks. That's an important part of the safety part of the plant. And since we are building the plant, we will be constructing a desalination plant that requires water to be stored. And the real intent there is to not use municipal water infrastructure and extract that from the sea. And then there will be other supporting infrastructure on the site as well, office buildings, chemistry buildings, and laboratories where we're testing a lot of items to make sure everything is fine. There will be a radiation waste facility on site where we will temporarily store waste on site until it gets transported to Walvis in the Northern Cape, where the low and intermediate level waste will be disposed of in that licensed facility. As well as later on the high-level waste in terms of the spent fuel, once the facilities is licensed and structured at Walvis to take care of that. So we will be shipping those through. In terms of the plant itself, the question often gets asked, have we chosen the technology? No, we have not. We've specified, and we need to specify for this process as well the parameters that the plant will need to meet. And we've done that through a plant parameter envelope process. The important part of this is an internationally accepted practice where we specify the key limits and criteria that we would expect a modern nuclear plant to operate within. It needs to meet our requirements. So we have specified at a high level what these parameters are that the plant will take into account to give us that envelope of criteria to be used. It's technology neutral because it takes into account criteria and from different plant designs that's there, and any future technology provider will need to meet the requirements of the plant parameter envelope and if it doesn't meet that, it would then obviously be scoped out from there. Obviously, the parameters are selected based on the current energy policy statement, which goes around specifying requirements for pressurized water reactor design, as well as small modular reactors for later deployment in the program. And that's what we're looking for, and that's what's currently being driven by the Integrated Resource Plan of 2025 that we're supporting on that. Just a final slide from my side on some of the typical plant safety features that we are expecting the plant to meet when we do go out to select an appropriate plant. And really these are the key safety features where we are expecting an increased usage of passive safety features. And this is really instances where we're relying on the forces of nature to provide the required safety function that is needed. For example, using gravity as a means of fulfilling certain critical safety functions, forces of nature is in place. Natural circulation to circulate the systems that's needed. Those are all proven concepts, and it doesn't require a lot of extra electric motor force or human activity in the immediate short term. And that's quite relatively new feature that's coming into the latest plant designs. We're looking at a simplified design that's not overly complex, that's easier to operate and maintain to allow us to operate the plant in a cost-effective manner for the next period of time. The concept of defensive debt, where we rely on multiple means of making sure we are able to maintain the plant and operate the plant in a safe manner. And that plant is designed with certain defensive debt facilities in mind to ensure a safe operating plant. It's quite closely coupled to what we call redundancy, and redundancy is really making sure we are able to maintain the same function through different and diverse means in terms of plant. For example, the use of a steam-driven pump or electrical-driven pump, two means of maintaining the same level of functionality by using two different driving forces to achieve that objective. The plant needs to be robust against external events. We're looking at high wind scenarios, tsunami effects, earthquake criteria, and those are all important factors that we learned from the industry and specify what we are looking for in terms of a robust plant to meet the requirements of extreme weather conditions that we are finding ourselves in. And finally, in terms of industry practice, making sure we get a plant with a low core damage frequency. The lower that number is, the better it is from our perspective in terms of the design outputs that we need to manage and monitor. So how a lot of the plant vendor designs are keeping their designs to maintain a low core damage frequency going forward on that. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we are just more than halfway, so let's move towards the end so we can open up questions.
Sorry, I should just speak up.
Yeah, well, okay. So we do have to look at alternatives in terms of the EIA regulations. It is a requirement. The one requirement for alternatives is they need to be feasible, reasonable, and viable. All right, so we have identified a number of alternatives in the scoping report and provided a good discussion on all of these with some nice comparisons as well. The first type of alternative that we've looked at is the alternative in terms of site, which we are looking at bundle strip and Taspit. We also have considered, we've got a comparative discussion on the different types of energy, so nuclear versus coal, gas, renewables, wind, solar, hydro, etc. These you will all find in Chapter 6 of the scoping report. There's a fairly significant discussion on each of these items. The design alternatives, things footprint, cooling alternatives, water intake discharge, dredging, spoil disposal, freshwater supply and brine disposal are all part of the alternatives that we're looking at. For example, spoil disposal at Taspit could be to the sea or to the beach, because they're looking at rebuilding one of the beaches there that had all the sand taken away, and they're busy redesigning the beach. So some of the sand that they removed from the site could go to that beach. It may need to be a combination of both, because they may not need all the spoil from the site for the beach. But that's just one of the examples. And then, of course, the last but not least is the one alternative that has to go through to the EIA is that of the no-go option. So what happens if it does not happen at all? Just as a bit of an orientation in terms of the location of the two sites, I'm sure you guys here in Gansbaai are very familiar with this coastline. The site there nestled between the Gansbaai abalone farms there in the south and Purdy Beach, and then Gansbaai just up the coast, and then Hermanus a little bit further. Taspit nestled between Oyster Bay and Cape St. Francis, with Sea Vista just nearby as well, and Humansdorp to the north. All right. In terms of specialist studies, we have a number of different specialist studies. I think there's about 24 of them included in the scoping report, and there will be at least 28 in the next phase. Some of those are split specialists that are coming out. For example, in the scoping report we have a socioeconomic report, but in the EIA we're actually splitting that report into three and having a social report, an economic report, and a tourism report, because we think each aspect is equally important. We have specialist studies grouped into physical environment, biodiversity, so the biophysical environment. We're looking at water resources, social, economic and land use, heritage and sense of place, human health and safety and risk, infrastructure, and then obviously waste, climate and long-term impact. So we've got a number of different things there. What has also changed and been added to the process subsequent to the previous process is the DFFE screening tool requirements. So we are needing to go onto the DFFE website. They've got a screening tool. We put in the different sites, and they have a back end of publicly available databases of all different types of information, whether it be flora, plants, animals, social, visual, all sorts of things. And we put in our site, and it gives us back a automatically generated screening report that highlights the sensitivities of the sites that we need to look at. And then it also tells us what other specialist studies it requires us to do. So the specialist studies that the DFFE screening report requires us to do are those in bold on the slide. So if you look in your on the sheets in front of you, it might be a little bit easier, but the ones in bold are the ones required by the DFFE. The ones that are not bold are extra studies that we've added, that we also think are just as important, and we've added those. We'll come back to you later.
Just one clarity, and what do you think bold? Well, look at that, and you look at infrastructure and services. The one below that's
sorry, so the ones in the bullets. The bulleted ones, sorry, the bold studies on the bullets under the main headings. Okay. The ones with a little double star are those that were involved in the Nuclear One process, where we brought them in for their already existing knowledge as far as possible. They have a lot of information. They've been with the projects for 10, 20 years now, and they have a lot of knowledge there. Where we couldn't get hold of previous specialists, or where we needed new eyes, the rest of the specialists are new specialists, new eyes coming in, reviewing and updating previous studies. What I can say is that the specialists that need to be on site have all been out to site subsequent. We've got no sort of these sort of studies here, biodiversity, fauna, flora, etc., marine biology, wetlands. They've all been out to site again to review the previous reports, see what has changed, update all the information so that it's all brand new information and up to date and relevant. All right. As part of the screening study and the site verification, sensitivity verification, we've generated 2 sensitivity maps. It's very busy, and it's probably easier to go into the report, into chapter 9, and just see what the discussion is around these different sensitivities. But this is the Button Skip site. You'll see the big green areas, the protected areas to the north. Red areas are critical biodiversity area 1s, and the big hashed area there is the heritage areas that have been identified on the coast of the site itself. Obviously, we're aware that those heritage sensitivities stretch both up and down the coast. The same is similar to the Tasman site. You can see that there's fewer critical biodiversity area 1s on the Tasman side, but obviously just as many heritage sites along the coast as well. All right. In terms of impacts, all the specialists have looked at the impacts. They've used a similar methodology. Well, they've used the same methodology so that we can compare accurately. None of the specialists have a different weighting. They're all the same. So heritage is as important as the flora, is as important as the groundwater, is as important as the social and the economic. So we haven't weighted anything. We have identified preliminary impacts in the report in chapter 10. There's discussions. There's a big table which gives the impact of discussion, the pre-mitigation significance from the specialists' assessment so far, some preliminary mitigation measures, and then what they believe the significance would be after those mitigation measures are implemented. It is a little bit more, maybe more information that sometimes is typically put in the scoping report, but we have made sure that we've ticked all the boxes that the department needs us to do in the scoping reports, so they can do a good review when they do read it. What's going to happen next is all those impacts will be reviewed, updated, maybe removed, maybe added to. In the next phase, once they've done some extra studies, there will be further studies being undertaken. Maybe, for example, they've done summer surveys and now they need to do the winter surveys, for example, for plants and animals. We need to do in both different seasons. So that will be happening. They will then do their detailed assessment, where they'll revisit all those impacts and identify whether those impacts were correct, whether they need to add any or change any of the significances, etc., now that they have more information. And this is where they also will put in their re-look at those mitigation measures and update and review those so they become practical, implementable, and knowing that they can be done without issue. All right, and they will go into the environmental management plan. This is where your input is very important. If you've gone through that chapter 10 and you think that maybe one of the specialists has missed something, you're welcome to send us a comment and we pass it on to the specialists and make sure that they take it into consideration. All right. So during the course of their studies at the moment, they've been asked to look at both the sites, Bottomsklip and Tasman, and they had to look at the impacts at both sites, see if there's any differences, and then tell us as the EAP which site they would prefer. So the flora guys would say which site they preferred. The air quality guys say which site they preferred, or the wetlands or groundwater or whatever it might be. We put them all together, and we can give you a bit of a summary. 4 of the studies came back and said buttons, they like buttons. It's much better than test. Okay. 2 of the studies came back and said buttons clip. But tastefit is fine. It's maybe a little bit less ideal, but it can work, but we do prefer buttons clip. 8 studies came back and said tastefit. Clear, out and out. And 11 studies said we don't mind. The impacts are the same. Okay. We then took that result in terms of the specialist input across the different studies. We then looked at going into what is feasible, what is reasonable, and what is viable. So reasonable, feasible, and viable is which site is easier to connect to the national grid. Where has the National Transmission Company of South Africa done a little bit more investigation into how they would do that? Testnet came up trumps there, because it is definitely easier to connect there, and there's a little bit more information. There's almost no information on that option for buttons clip. They just do not know how they would connect to the grid at this point. Then we looked at what we call NNR readiness, which is the readiness to meet all the NNR's requirements, and their tastefit is once again much closer to that readiness than buttons clip. Buttons clip still needs a lot of investigation, etc. There's a lot of studies that still need to be done. So once we put all of that together and the specialist discussions on the top, we have recommended in our plan of study for EIA that tastefit is sent forward for detailed study in the next phase. And that buttons clip is parked for now. We haven't said that buttons clip is fatally flawed. We haven't said that it's not a good site. It isn't fatally flawed, it is a good site. But there's just not enough information for it to be feasible, reasonable, and viable at this point in time. So it's still an option in the future, but not right now. So we have put forward tastefit for the EIA. This is not our final decision. We can only recommend it at this stage. The final report goes to the DFFE. They have to review it. They have their 42 days to review the report and come back to us and give us one of 3 answers. Either reject the scoping report, send us back to the drawing boards, tell us to do more work and do the whole scoping process again. That's one option. Second option is that they agree with our recommendation and we move forward into the EIA with tastefit as the site location, and then look at alternatives in terms of design, etc., etc., etc. Or third option is that they come back and say, we actually think we should do detailed studies on both sides. Okay. So there's 3 options that the DFFE could come back, but our recommendation is what stands here, but it is subject to DFFE approval, which we hope to get in July. Okay, because that should be the end of their 42 days. All right, so that's the end of my little story. I'm going to hand over back to Tony to open up the floor. Maybe I can just quickly do this. Any comments that you might have? The QR code, this poster is up at the back as well. This QR code will take you to the online registration form. You have it on your presentations. So if you have anybody that wasn't here tonight and still wants to register, they can use that QR code, they can scan it and do the online form, and it'll come through on an email to us. There's also the email that you're welcome to send your written comments to. There's a WhatsApp number, there's the office number as well. There's some more details at the back. And then we also have 2 QR codes, one for the website and one for the data-free website that you could use to go and look at the reports. And as Tony said, the data-free website, you don't have to have any data on your phone. You can still accessibly pick up the cost. All right. So that is an option for everybody, because we know not everybody has Wi-Fi or fiber at their house. So that is an option for everybody. But back to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Ash. Can I just call, so I've asked Tumi and Tengu to just help me with their hands to make sure that we don't miss anyone. That lady that had her hand up earlier to this in the meeting, please go ahead. The floor is open for questions. Just speak into online. Just for the recording purposes, thank you.
Ek is 'n privaat huiseienaar in Gansbaai. En daar is vir my 'n hele klomp bekommernis. The most important one is the risk of catastrophic accidents. I think that is the basis of most of the threats. Whether it's to humans or whether it's to the environment, it really is very, very concerning, and you were right in saying that it is a very emotive and emotional issue. The things that worry me is which department, please excuse me, I'm old and retired, so which department did you speak of earlier on? What department? Is it national? Is it provincial? Is it the AR department? Is it forestry? Who is it? That was my first question. The second one that worried me was that you say in this hierdie blaadjie van julle sê julle vir ons, a specific reactor technology has not yet been selected, and at the same time we have you people coming here and giving us a whole breakdown on a specific reactor. So, not fair. It's not fair. It's also not very open. Ek voel julle moet vir ons sê. Nee? Because I'm old, I had great difficulties in getting for free onto your website. But I'll discuss that with you individually as we go along. Also, Eskom would put up these huge big pylons. I would like to know if it was at Bantam's Clip, this reactor and a new project, where would those huge structures be placed and how wide and big are they? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. So the first question is very easy to answer. The main competent authority is the National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. They are the ones who will do the reviews and issue the authorization, either grant or reject the authorization for the facility. So that is the National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. The nuclear site installation license, that process is handled by the National Nuclear Regulator, and the two processes are completely separate. I think I'll hand over to Sadiqa on the technology side.
Thanks, Ash. So in terms of the reactor technology, what I've described is the typical pressurized water reactor design. And it was a typical layout of what their design would be. It's not technology specific in terms of a specific vendor. There's quite a few vendors that provide that type of technology, and that's the technology that we are currently constrained within the nuclear energy policy. So it's not a boiling water reactor, it's not an RBMK type of reactor, it's not a CANDU heavy water reactor that's there. And we didn't explain them those because those are not allowed in the policy. But there are various different reactor vendor designs for pressurized water reactor, but they all basically have the outline that have shared in terms of what their technology would look like in terms of PWR reactor. They we are looking at. In terms of the transmission.
So I think maybe in terms of the major disaster that you did speak about, it is covered in the report, and maybe Ashley could speak to it. But yeah, there has been 3 that have occurred, and that's all explained. I think the last one was Fukushima, and the first one was 3 Mile Island in 1979, another one in 1986, another one in 2011. But maybe Sadiqa can come up and just talk about all what he talked about, and how we make sure that there is safety. In terms of the transmission lines, while we have, that's one of the reasons for Bantam split not being proposed in this study, and we'd have to get those power lines over the mountains. And it would be significant. You probably know.
How big are they?
Yeah.
So a typical power line structure of a pylon, there's various different types of pylon structures. And they're typically around sort of 40 meter high, with a 40 meter wide servitude. So where they would be placed, we don't know yet. So we are not looking at the transmission lines in this EIA. So what will happen is, we're looking at the facility itself. The applicant is aware that, is somebody's phone? It's not one of ours.
This person is going to buy beer for us. Whose phone is this?
We're going to just... No, it's not this phone.
Not that one.
It's Mila's helping the lady over there, so don't worry. Okay, so while they're sorting that out, we are looking at the facility. We are not looking at the transmission lines because they don't know where they're going to go yet. Okay, and at this point, if we are going to look at taspent in the next year, in the next phase, then the National Transmission Company of South Africa is going to focus their attention on the taspent area and identify the routes for the power lines there. Okay, and not here. We also split the EIAs because there's 2 different applicants. So Eskom Holding Stock Limited will be for the facility, and then for the transmission lines, it's the National Transmission Company of South Africa. So 2 different applicants. There is the risk, and the applicant is aware of it, that yes, they can't connect. So if their project is approved, it is very likely that the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, or the DFFE as we call them, will put a condition in the facility EIA that says you cannot start construction until the EIA or the transmission lines is complete and approved. Okay, so if that causes delays, the applicant is aware of that risk. Okay, but the pylons, yes, I do agree, there's different types of pylons, and those different types of pylons would be discussed in the transmission line EIA. The types of impacts, the other reason why they split the EIAs is because the type of impacts is very different. Moving on in terms of the catastrophic event question, you will see in the next phase we have a specialist study that will be included that is called emergency planning, and that study outlines the typical emergency planning that is there. But I think there's very specific procedures and policies that Eskom already also have in place, are based on Kuberg as well for all of those emergency events. Okay.
Thank you, and if I'm right, during the next phase there will be an opportunity to comment on those reports and sessions. Right, so I'm going to go with Kumelo. Please take the mic. So I see your hands. Just, Anton, I see your hand. It's like with the blue, thank you. So I'm going to just ask to me and then go to take the mics to the people. Thanks. Please go ahead.
Hi. In the 2006 proposal, we were going to collaborate with the Russians to build this nuclear energy proposal. So I'm wondering which international companies or countries are you going to collaborate with to build this, or do we have a technological know-how ourselves? What about Mandela saying we will never use nuclear energy or technology? I also want to know if you considered climate change and rising of oceans, and this is going to be built right on the edge of the ocean, and those kinds of unknowns in the future.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Sedika to respond to the first question about which international countries are you collaborating with, and then hand over to Ash for the next question about probable impacts, if the climate change impacts are being considered and to what extent.
No, thanks for the question. I think, first of all, we are currently have not yet identified any specific country for the deployment of what we're looking at. When we will follow an open and transparent procurement process for selecting of the vendor, there are currently a few countries that are able to provide the design that we would look at, and they need to provide those options out there. There's an American design, there's a French design, there's a Russian design, there's a Chinese design, and there's a South Korean design, and they all have different options available on what we would look at, and the market would determine what we would down select on. We have not pre-judged, we have not pre-selected any specific vendor at this moment in time. We have not yet entered into that process, and that will follow an open and transparent process in terms of the proper procurement process to follow through on that. Thanks.
Okay, in terms of climate change, we do have a climate change study. They've already done a scoping report, and they will be looking at impacts of climate change on the facility. So exactly what you're talking about, rising sea levels, etc., and how far away from the coast it should be to eliminate any issues on that front. And then they will also be looking at the impacts of the facility on climate change. So in both directions. So that is a study that you can have a look at their scoping report already. It's a very comprehensive report, and they will only be adding to that and updating that and adding more detail into the next phase. Okay.
So there was another comment you had on what about Mandela saying no nuclear? I think you're referring to the non-proliferation agreement, which is linked to nuclear weapons, but not to nuclear energy. I'm not sure, but I think that's maybe what you might be thinking of.
If you do want a summary of what that non-proliferation of nuclear weapons act is, there is an actual act that looks at that, and there is a summary of that act in Chapter 7 of the scoping report. So if you want some more detail about what that act specifically mentions and states, but it is to do with nuclear weaponry and not nuclear energy. So there's a distinct difference on that, but there's a summary in the report if you wish to go read it.
Right, thank you. I think it was here. These two gentlemen were first. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation, Mr. I have a couple of concerns.
Can you just state your name, please?
My name is Roy, and I have a couple of concerns. If I go to your presentation, you go to slide number 7.
This one? Or this one?
You look at the point there at the back. The IRP 2025 plans for 200 megawatts of new nuclear power to be added by 2030. So my question to you guys is this. Are you going to be able to build a nuclear power station within 4 years? All right?
I can answer that question.
We'll go there. Then you go into your... this is the other one as well. But you look at that and maybe to put a bigger picture. You know, we've been through a process of building Medupi and Kusile. Eskom has been involved, they built these things. How long did it take them to build it? Eskom can answer that, but I think it's 14 years, 15 years. We're looking at a technology here that we know nothing about as South Africans. Yes, we've got Kuburg, we've got a handful of guys, and the guys that were there all left the country. So it's all new guys sitting there. So we're sitting here and we're bragging, we're not really helping, but we put the people and paint a picture of them. We look at Medupi. Medupi is 4,800 megawatts. So we're looking at a station as big as that being put here. Okay? And we've got to excavate that power, and you guys have already spoken about it. Medupi, and initially the discussions were to excavate that 400 or the 5,000 megawatts, whatever the case may be. To get that up, we had to have 765 kV lines exporting that power out. We're looking at the same size here. We're looking at the same scenario now. I see on your slide that you go placement 400 kV, which is fine because the grid on that side is 400 kV. But over here, if we're going to go 400 kV, you need to double it up. That means 12 lines taking the power out. I don't know. You know, you guys, I don't know what you're smoking, but maybe you must give us some of that too, because then you can enjoy it as well. But you look at it and say, well, this is great, and it's not trying to be nasty or whatever, but we've been through this. I've been through that placement exercise too with Eskom. I used to work for Eskom too. So I've got enough information and stuff like that of what it is. And we're looking at this and I say, it's great. We're giving the guys a nice little picture of just, like we mentioned earlier, we're just looking at generation and then we look at transmission, 270 EIS. I agree with that, no problem. But the problem that we face with is a lot of the studies that the guys have done, the studies that have been done that from number one is, what's it, 12, 15 years old already. Now we're just taking those studies, putting them in a mixing machine and saying that's still maybe relevant. I don't believe in that process. You know, yes, the basics might still be there, but a proper new study should ultimately be done to cater for all the 12, 15 years ago, there was different policies and procedures. We've got different ones now, and we have to look at those things too. And I look at those things, I look at the technical side of the stuff. Environmental side is a nice wishy-washy side. We look at this, we look at that, we paint that green, and this one must be blue. But you look at the technical side of things. We need to talk about those things to the general people here, so they also understand. We're going to bring in these big machinery, and our roads are not going to handle that stuff. You can look at the rest of the country. We've got trucks running those roads already. They're falling apart. Now, our good roads that we've got here, one road, the R43, that you guys are going to abuse, are going to destroy it. And you can stand there and say, oh, you know, it's not our problem, it's sand rail or whatever it is, fingers pointing and stuff like that. They need to give us a proper picture of what's going to go on. Because it's great, yes, we say it's nuclear, and also to that, will we benefit from that? Maybe so. We might get a second line coming here that might help us with our fires and stuff. They take our lines down on a regular basis, virtually every year. We lose lines because Eskom don't want to do their maintenance under the lines. And they say, it's not us, it's a landowner. It's, you know, it's the finger pointing. And we're seeing the same thing come here now. The guys are starting to point fingers. And you really spoken about, oh, the 2 EIAs, that's transmission. There's a gap between the two where they have to couple in. That has to be addressed between the two of them. So they tell me that that's there, this is ours. I can't buy that. Give us a total picture.
Thank you for your comment. So the 2030 number is when they want to start construction, and the IRP says the plants, the first units should be operating by 2039. 36. So I'm going to hand over to Sadiqa just to highlight the IRP side of things and the time frames there.
And I really got comments that let's just try and see if we can address it appropriately. So in terms of the RRP 2025, it does specify we need to deploy 5,200 megawatts between 2036 and 2039. The current planning that we have in terms of the process we're looking to deploy 2 plants at Danafontein next to Kubu, and the other 2 plants will either go here or as per the recommendation as just mentioned at Preston. That would mean that we would be constructing on both sides to meet the 2039 deadline. It also includes provision for small modular reactors in that space. On either the sides or in the Mpumalanga region, we'll be looking around transitioning some of the coal-fired power plants to SMR technology because those plants are going to become decommissioned. So the plan is on SMR deployment in those sites around there. The small modular reactor, the SMR technology. So we are looking into that technology for deployment as part of the 5,200 megawatt items. So in terms of the actual deployment and part of what the impact needs to look at is around infrastructure development on the two sites, on what will need to be upgraded in terms of roads, evacuation routes and those items. Those are all part of the study, and those facilities will need to be identified and strengthened as part of the project process to go forward. Not just here, but basement as well as when we're looking at what the capabilities at data content itself.
So, just how will people who will benefit? Who will power be exported?
Well, who will benefit? I suppose the country will benefit because we will have security of supply. So that's the first thought, the security of supply. We are shutting down 8 gigawatts of coal in 2030. So the need for some additional base load is recognized in the integrated resource plan, and the country does need to make sure that they have security of supply going forward. We don't want to go back into our load shedding situation. And then obviously if there's construction here, it has both positive and negative impacts on the local communities, but it does also create some opportunities, and that will be looked at in the environmental impact assessment in all the areas.
Just on the new study comment. So this is a brand new, fresh study. Yes, the specialists, some have been involved for many years, but you will notice that their reports are not the same as before. They have been to site, or they have been going to site for since sort of probably September last year, where they have been updating any of the information that is now out of date. All the studies are now up to date as of this year. Current information, some of the especially some of those new studies where we've got brand new specialists in who have completely gone to site and had a re-look at the sites. I think there's already been, I think from a heritage point of view, the impacts, I wouldn't say have completely changed, but they've definitely been updated, and some of the previous the impacts have been removed, new ones added, and the significance ratings have been changed. So there are new eyes. WSP wasn't involved in the previous one. The report is very different to the previous report, and we are looking at it as a brand new study and not just relying on the old study and just doing a rehash. So we are being very diligent about that, and it is definitely, there are new eyes on the work.
Thank you, and I just want to remind you that is why we are going through a public participation process, to make sure that whatever is presented is tested and not assumed. And there will, if I'm correct, there will be peer reviewers as well that will be appointed during the impact assessment phase to look at all the specialist studies.
And many new peer reviewers.
And new peer reviewers. Okay.
The same ones as before.
So I'm going to give this gentleman a chance, and then I'm going to move to this block and give them a chance. Anton, I know you had your hand up. I see you. I see that lady there at the back. And this lady here, I see you. Let's move to this block and give them a chance. Thank you. Can I just see these 3 questions? Yeah. I will. That's my first time.
My name is Ian. you can see there's a national imperative for 5 to 10 gigawatts of power. What is the probability that both impacts are negative, and Eskom board, a parastatal, reporting to Parliament, goes to Parliament and says, we're in the check, but we need this, and Parliament says, choose one. And Eskom chooses Bantam's Club. Does it happen like that? That's the one question. The second question is, after the announcement that it is Bantam's Club, people will not want to come and live here, and people will start moving out. So your property value, Kali will tell me, your property value is going to go down. Who loses this property value? Is it us? Because we're not going to get it back. That's the second question. The third question is, there is a catastrophic event. And initially the wind blows out to sea, and we all get a nice chance to go to Paul, but we haven't got a house. And the wind starts coming back and pollutes our area, and our area is now polluted. What happens to your property value? Does your insurer pay you out? Or do they say, jammer op de hoor, it's force de majeure? How does it work? This is what we want to know. Those are 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the first, I'm blank. The first question was authorization. Has the decision already been taken? Because nuclear forms part of national policy, what happens if the EIA shows that none of the sites are feasible? Will there be a scenario that Eskom will be called into Parliament and asked to choose? And what if it is Bantam's Club? How do we deal with that?
Well, basically that can't happen. This process has to follow. The competent authority is the DFFE, and they hold the ultimate responsibility for the decision. We can only provide a recommendation so far. Scoping phase recommends taspert, and in the EIA they will make a decision. Eskom is not allowed as the applicant, and Parliament also wouldn't be allowed to ask Eskom to make the decision. They're just not allowed to by law in terms of the National Environmental Management Act and the EIA regulations. So the DFFE are ultimately the decision maker at the end of the day. So from that point of view, Eskom cannot be asked to make a decision themselves.
And then can we start with property values?
Property values. There is.
Sorry, that's linked to if Bantam's Club is chosen, people will move away, and it will cause a big impact on property values, tourism, and then if there's pollution incident, it will also, how will property values be affected, and how do you study that?
Yeah, so the property value issue will be looked at in terms of the economic impact assessment that is coming for the next phase. It's a big portion of it. It's already been identified as a negative impact in the socioeconomic study currently in the scoping report, and there is a section in the economic assessment that needs to take that into account. So I must admit I'm not an economist, but there will be detailed studies on that and what the property value, what would happen there.
Right. Thank you. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is Johan from the Gansbaai Ratepayer Association. I've got 2 comments and 1 question. My first comment is if I have a look at the slide with a map of Bantam's Club with the shades. You don't have to put it on, but it's just surprising to me that one of the blocks that the International Atomic Energy Board did for Bantam's Club in an area which is critically endangered vegetation. It might be wishy-washy stuff, the environment, but it's still important. still critically important for the Western Cape's floral region. I'm just surprised that that block was dead for Bantamslip. My question is related to the question here on my left. The Western Cape Province Environmental Implementation Plan of 2025 to 2030 leaned strongly towards the environment. Now what I want to know is if the national DFFE will override that, the provincial one in this case, or will they take into account the provincial plan for the environment? And then just lastly, also a comment but also a question. I had the privilege to have a look at court papers in connection with the Dynaffontein plant that's ongoing. There were 6 affidavits that I saw, and all 6 of them summarized at the end is that there weren't enough stress or investigation done into renewable sources, other renewable sources than nuclear. In other words, wind and solar. There wasn't enough of that, and there was a tendency to lean strongly towards nuclear and ignore the other renewable sources. So I'd like to know if someone can answer that. Is will that court case affidavits also be looked at? Should Bantamslip come into the picture again? Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions.
So yes, the Bantamslip site is sensitive, and I believe the specialist even noted that, and if I can remember, they actually picked placement over Bantamslip for exactly that reason. The Western Cape planning, all the different biodiversity sector plans, etc., have to be taken into account in terms of sensitivities and the verifications of that. And the DFFE, they don't override it. They take it all into account. So in terms of looking at Bantamslip versus Tastement and what we've put into the report and seeing if our recommendation of Tastement going forward is valid, then they will have to look at both the Eastern Cape sector plan as well as the Western Cape sector plan and all the relevant bits and pieces to see what province also has to say. What I also want to add is that the Western Cape Department and the Eastern Cape Department are commenting authorities, and they do need to provide comment on the reports when that also goes to the department, and the department do read those comments. We've done many other EIAs, for example, in the Mpumalanga, and the DFFE take very seriously what the Mpumalanga department have to say in terms of various, I know of a couple, we've done some wind facilities in Mpumalanga, which the department has taken very seriously what the provincial department has to say. So they don't just override. My experience is that they take the provincial comments into account when they review and base their decisions on the holistic picture of what is presented in the report, as well as all the comments and the responses. So from that point of view, I've not seen them just blanketly override provincial requirements. I've not seen that in my personal experience. Okay, so in terms of the alternatives and renewables, I'll also hand over to Deirdre just to explain that energy mix requirement again. I think it's important that it's in terms of giving the country a solid base of power with base load and peaking and options and abilities to fill the gaps. Deirdre has a very nice way of explaining it, but it's important to have all the different energy alternatives going all at the same time. So we have coal, they're looking at gas, we have wind, and solar, even when they are brought in from independent power producers, they're still adding to that mix. So it's not necessarily an either or, it's a and. In terms of looking at alternatives to this facility, we have done a very comprehensive comparison in Chapter 6, which is the alternatives chapter, of all the different renewable energy alternatives. Please go and have a look at that. And that is being beefed up a lot since previous, and basically on the back of the comments that were given on the Dana Fontaine appeals. We've really looked at that in much more detail, looking at the sites, what would be good on the site. Solar, for example, not great because it would take up even more space to get that same amount of megawatts. It would literally obliterate that site and then some. So, and not the small footprint that the nuclear would be. So all of those sort of things are looked at in that discussion. So yeah, please go and have a look at it. You're welcome to provide more comment, but I'll hand over to Deirdre for... Oh, okay, never mind. Here we go. I thought so too.
Right, can I just highlight, there is a blue Taz outside, number plate CCK, your lights are on. So please attend to that if it is your vehicle. Thank you. I just want to see, there were 3 questions in this block. Thank you, that lady in the white.
Good evening. My name is Mary. I live in Stanford. I have one big question. I'm not anti-nuclear. I know we need electricity, but I'm wondering why Eskom has even considered this part of the country, this particular coastline, for a nuclear power station, because we have mountains. They're huge obstacles. What are the logistics for getting machinery here? I remember some time ago, well, decades ago in Bloberg and Table View, when they were transporting turbines and replacements through to Kuko, and it was a nightmare. So, I mean, if you try and get a large swimming pool around the circle in Hermanus, it would be an impossibility. It seems to me that, the research is wonderful, but why are they wasting money on this particular inquiry? Because it will cost tens of millions. Surely we're wasting taxpayers' money. Surely they should consider logically how it's going to be serviced. How will they get rid of the spent fuel rods? On the other coast, on the west coast, they still have a railhead. I'm assuming if we can find out where the fuel rods are now dumped, where would you transport fuel rods from here to the Northern Cape or wherever they're stored?
Thank you. So if I understand correctly, your first concern is about how was the site selected for Buitensklip, given the mountainous area and the potential impact on cost and environmental sensitivity, and also cost to the taxpayer. So it is in the report. You're going to speak the fact that's covered.
Yeah, so there was a planning process, there was a site selection study done in the 80s, but in terms of transportation, which I think was the key side of things, there is a traffic and transport study. There was one previously, and I believe previously Buitensklip was actually not preferred because of the issues with getting large infrastructure here, and potentially even having to barge the large infrastructure around on the sea rather than coming, because it's not just the local roads that are the issue, it's even coming over Solaris Pass. So we already are aware of that, and it is one of the reasons why we've also recommended Tastement, because to get large infrastructure to Tasement is easier. I'm not saying it's easy, but easier than to get large infrastructure into Buitensklip. So that was one of the reasons why we are recommending not to look at Buitensklip at this point. So I think that was the one, and there will be a more detailed traffic impact assessment that will look at how and where the traffic would need to go. If the DFFP approve our recommendation, then they will focus that on Tastement, because they won't need to look at Buttocks Clip at this stage. So that from a traffic point of view. And then I think in terms of waste, I'll hand over to Stika just to give you some background on waste and where it goes in terms of the different levels. But there's only one in South Africa, registered waste facility for medium and low level waste in terms of radioactive material. The high level waste at this stage would be kept on site. And it's quite interesting that the amount of waste is actually it's not a lot. It's like a Coke can of waste, sort of. I don't know what it is in the report. I can't remember what it is, but it is a minimal amount. But it's actually stored on site at the moment. What is the regulator with the guys who run pulpits?
The National Red Waste Disposal Institute.
The National Red Waste Disposal Institute. They are busy currently doing an EIA, I believe, or about to start an EIA to look at options to dispose of high-level waste at their facility with various. I still need to get my head around all the options and the alternatives, but they are looking at a facility to dispose high-level waste at pulpits. So keep an eye out for that EIA. It's definitely not WSP doing it. So I don't know who's doing it actually. But they are busy with that EIA. So, and Eskom would only dispose of the high-level waste there if they get it right to get that facility authorized and registered for that type of waste. So, but other than that, it would be stored on site. And I guess ask Lika just to talk about the transport of it and how it is taken up to the North Cape.
And how much spent fuel?
And how much spent
if produced in 40 years?
How much spent fuel is another exact number, but it's about football. The size of the football field, with all canisters together, with all the high-level waste is on. The surface area is around a football and a half in cross-section area, a football field of around
for 40 years of waste.
For 40 years of waste, yes. It's not a significant amount compared to an ash mine or an ash dump where there is huge volumes of hectares of land is being used up to store and keep ash in storage for that period of time, on a short period of time. So, but we didn't prepare that slide, but there's a nice slide that we actually have that we could put on the website to just share that information around it. But in terms of the high-level waste, the National Red Waste Disposal Institute is the entity that is charged by the national government for managing the disposal of nuclear waste, the low and intermediate level waste. That waste, particularly when it leaves site, it needs to be properly controlled, it needs to be measured, it needs to be appropriately packaged. And the packages that they go for the two types of decimal that we use in site, that we would use here as well, is a metal drum for low, very low level waste, or concrete drum. These are monitored on site before it leaves site and checked by the national regulator that it meets the acceptance criteria before shipment. They are packaged on the drum that is then secured on a loaded truck that is transported to the Northern Cape or the Balkans facility, which is managed by Nawadi. They just received their license last year in the transition from NEXA to the Institute for the Management of Low and Intermediate Level Waste. And that's strictly controlled. It's escorted by police through to the facility when it leaves site, so it's under constant control. The drums itself needs to meet specific design criteria. We do drop tests on them to ensure that if they fall off the truck, that they don't burst open and expose any radioactivity to the environment. And they are, as both the concrete and the steel drums are, we have required that we need to drop test them as part of the design process of those drums. And then they are buried in clay pits specifically designed to manage them at the fault facility around that. In terms of high-level waste, Narwadi is busy with the EIA for a centralized interim storage facility where we will be storing the high-level waste or the used nuclear fuel that we have. We currently are storing those on site on spent fuel pools, and we're currently busy with a campaign on putting them into what we call dry storage carts or canisters, and they are being kept on site. And once a facility at Narwadi or the Railways Disposal Institute is completed and licensed, will the shipments be taken from site to transport them over to Narwadi for storage at the centralized interim storage facility. They will then take possession of that and then do the final disposal in accordance with their license conditions for the facility to do that. They're mandated to do that. We only have a mandate in terms of our license to manage and store it on site until the Railways Disposal Institute is able and licensed to perform the final disposal activities for us. And that's the entity that started that, and there's regulations that is in place that we need to meet to make sure that we meet our mandate and they meet theirs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadiqa. So can I just check if there was still one hand left this side? Yes. I'm going to get to this block now. I'm just going to get the last person in this block to Charles. Yeah. If you have.
My name is Shannon. So just two simple questions because some of us might not get to read all the detailed scoping report. The EIA, does that include the full life cycle of the nuclear power station, including the decommissioning? So, for instance, with Coburg's EIA have included the impacts of the decommissioning of Coburg. And the other question is just for some idea of the marine impact. I know you don't have a special report for that, but just a rough idea of what is the extent of the impact on the marine environment in terms of the tree length impact volumes. What is the scope of impact, immediate impact? The diagram shows quite small, the soil obviously was if you extrapolate that out, what is the kind of extent of the impact?
Right, thank you. So full life cycle is that being assessed. And then secondly, what is the extent of the marine impact?
Yeah. So the EIA is required to look at the full life cycle, so construction, operation, and decommissioning. The EIA will look at that in more detail, and the EMP also has to provide mitigation measures for all three phases. So we are required to have a look at that life cycle. So in answer to your question, yes, it will. In terms of marine impact, there is as you know, the draft, the scoping reports already. There will be much more detail in the next phase. At the moment, things like the impacts that they have looked at the moment. Most of them post-mitigation have come down to sort of medium to low impact. They're not expecting any catastrophic or fatal floor impacts in terms of marine biology or ecology. I can't remember all the different impacts that they identified. there were a number, so definitely go and have a look at the report. But none of them after mitigation came up as high at all. I don't know if that's...
My question was just get an idea of the extent.
Oh, okay. So I think... So where the pipe comes out and say the water...
The impact.
Yeah. So it's actually quite small. The pipes would... I don't know, the discharge pipes and the intake pipes are... I can't remember now the exact meters. so 6-meter diameter pipes going out sort of 100, 200 meters into the ocean, and discharging at slightly elevated temperatures. The temperatures are not boiling water versus cold water. It's literally cold water versus like 1 or 2 degrees warmer, and that dissipation dissipates very quickly. So it doesn't make the ocean warmer in sort of incrementally. So because the water comes out just slightly warmer than what the sea temperature is, the impact of it dissipates quite quickly within 2 or 3 meters of the end of the pipe. But there will definitely be more information on that in the next phase. I don't know if that helps you. Sort of the extent is sort of 300 meters from the shoreline. Okay.
I think more information about that zone of influence will be shared in the impact assessment phase, but we've noted your concern. Thank you.
Send it to the specialist.
Yeah, and this will be shared with all our specialists. So all the questions raised tonight will be given through to our specialists. So, right, thank you, this block, for your patience. I'm going to go with that lady there at the back. On this gentleman. There's a few questions. So the ladies first, thank you.
Sorry, I've had my hand up for a long time and it's been a very...
Where are we now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm thank you.
Yes, can I have that chance, please?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. What the gentleman just said, I find it quite concerning. Kuberg was designed for a 50-year lifespan, and a few years ago that another 20 years were added to that lifespan. I find it very concerning that after 40 years they still have not devised a way to deal with high-level waste. That does not reflect well on a new project. Okay, and also the cost. I'm quite concerned about the cost. I just checked in South Africa after, let's call it 15 years of heavy corruption and mismanagement. Our national debt is 6 trillion rand. Now the figure thrown around for a project like this is about 1 trillion rand. The government is planning not to do only the Bantamsklip. They've already are going ahead with Dynaffontein, which is 1 trillion rand. Now they want to do Taspin, 2 trillion rand. And they've also indicated that they eventually want to do Bantamsklip as well. So that's 3 trillion rand. That's just on a single project. That's not all the other projects which goes on in government. I find that really concerning. Now my other issue is with the independence of the practitioner. Yes. By definition, shouldn't you be sourcing your document? To be independent, you should source your documents and your data from independent sources. Now, at the last meeting, you indicated that you got your social or your cost analysis from a nuclear practitioner in Canada, I think it was, and it was plainly wrong. I've actually circulated documents, the Lazard documents, stating that nuclear is the third most expensive type of energy, and there's people here that have a look at it because I did circulate. So I'm concerned. How independent are you really? I've already raised the point that you are being paid by Eskom, which is also it calls into question your independence. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ash, I'm going to ask you to respond to the independence question, and then with regards to the concern around the cost, we know those concerns. I think you want to comment on that. I'll give Deirdre an opportunity to comment on the cost impact, and then just the concern is noted also regarding the waste and the extension of the Kuba facility, and that you find it concerning that a revised waste management strategy has not been confirmed and found after all these years.
So, we do note your concern about the independence. WSP is independent from Eskom. We are a separate global consultancy. We sit on the Toronto Stock Exchange. All the specialists that are involved in the project are independent from Eskom. They have all, you'll see, I think it's in Appendix E, I believe, of the report. Everybody has signed, including ourselves, the declaration of the independence. So we've signed those. We are a consulting firm. We do get paid for the work that we do, because studies do cost a lot of money, and somebody does need to pay for them. So we get paid by the applicant. Yes, in every single EIA that we do, the applicant pays. So it's not just Eskom that's paying us to do the work. It is any EIA that we do, the applicant is responsible for the fee. It doesn't matter whether it's an Eskom project or an IPP project or a SASL project or a mining project, the applicant pays for the EIA. And each of them do so on the knowledge that they pay our full fee before the decision is made by the department. So our final invoice, or the full fee for the work that we've done and all the specialists have done, is issued on submission of the final report. It is not linked to the decision or the outcome of the decision. So if the decision by the department is rejected or not approved, we have still been paid. So that is where somebody does need to pay for it. I think the taxpayer would prefer the applicant to bear that risk and the cost instead of themselves or, say, the communities. So, but that is true of any EIA that is done across the country. It doesn't matter who the applicant is. The applicant is always responsible for the...
And the National Environmental Management Act.
Yes, states that as well. Yeah. So the applicant is responsible for the fee regardless of who that applicant is, or what process or project it might be that is the EIA.
Sorry, can I just
I didn't hear that.
I want to redirect.
No, sorry. I did say that at the previous meeting that it is a South African problem. In my opinion, those funds should be paid by Eskom, but it should be released by, say, the public, if they feel that the process was proper. But I admit it's a South African problem. EIAs are paid for by the people that's doing the construction. But what I actually want to hear from Eskom is how do they plan to raise this 3 trillion rand? I'm really interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Anthony, you asked that question twice now in the first 2 meetings, and we've said we intend on going into partnerships with the vendors. How are we going to finance it exactly? There has not been a decision on. We're at the beginning part of this process. So the financing and funding will be determined, and the amount that you are stating is, I'm not sure where you got that number from, but I don't think it's a public number, and it's not the number that we have. And I believe it will be some bit less than that. And then in terms of the high-level waste and the spent, or what we call spent fuel. It is common practice internationally that it is stored on site until the decommissioning happens, or until there is a high-level waste disposal site. So it's not just South Africa that does that. And the decommissioning of a power station is very, very well controlled. So I think somebody asked, do we have a decommissioning plan for Koeberg when the EIA was done? When Koeberg was built, there was no EIA process. If we were to decommission Koeberg, we would have to do an EIA for the decommissioning on the environmental side. And it has, in terms of the National Nuclear Regulator, it has a decommissioning plan. So there's two authorities and regulators that would manage that.
Thank you very much. Anything?
Can I answer the decommissioning?
Please.
If I can just add to the decommissioning, Deidre is quite right. Koeberg, we did not have requirements in the EIA for decommissioning. But when we've done the life extension, the regulator has regulated that we should have a decommissioning plan in place. That is regulated, the regulator, they're looking at that. And they've also insisted that we do have a decommissioning provision, and we are quite tightly being regulated to that for the long-term operation period for decommissioning, that it is taken into account appropriately. In terms of new plants, the difference between a new nuclear plant that we would be deploying in any of the areas that we have compared to Koeberg is the fact that decommissioning is now a design feature of the plant that we've asked for. So the plants are designed for decommissioning to lower the cost, and it takes into account a full life cycle approach around that. So the new plants will have a decommissioning plan that we will see before they're constructed, and it's constructed to make sure that that decommissioning process is taken into account in the design process, so that we are able to expect that appropriately during the relevant time that it comes through completion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, right, so it's 8:20. I just want to get a sense of who still has, I know you have a question still, I know you've got a question. Can I just get, you've got a question, yeah, I know you have. So can I just show you all the hands who have questions so that we can wrap up the session? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can I just check here? 7 questions. I'm not sure if I've counted you now, I think it's 8. 8 questions, 9 questions left. So please keep your questions short and don't repeat your question if it's already been asked, please, so that we can keep this focused. Thanks. More time. I think we will go over the time. Will it be alright? 10 minutes? 15 minutes? No? No. So please keep it quick. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alida Pictorius, and I'm an owner and also a food safety professional. And Gansbaai is a fishing town. Fish is scanned here and abalone is produced here. And I would like to know, firstly, if food manufacturing and the risks thereof have been considered in the environmental impact assessment. As part of food safety, every factory that is producing food, it is a requirement to assess the radiological hazards on that food production. So firstly, that is a scientific question, and secondly, as part of that, has the public perception of that impact? But public perception is, we all know, it's a highly emotional thing, and it's not something that easily changes with science. It's how the people feel about it. And so we are producing food here in Gansbaai, and we need people to buy this food. And once we have a nuclear plant here, has the impact of that public perception on the food we manufacture been considered as part of the environmental impact assessment? So that's my second question. And sorry, just getting quick answers. My third question is why do we need an alternative site? Why can we not just build another nuclear site next to Koeberg? All the infrastructure is there. What is the reason if it's a very low risk on the environment? What is the reason to have an alternative site away from the current infrastructure?
Thank you. Can I repeat that?
So in terms of the marine impact on fisheries, the marine ecologists are looking at that. There's already some, statements and information in the scoping report on that, which they've already determined is low in terms of their preliminary studies. In terms of the public perception, that is an excellent a comment, and that we'll be giving definitely. Steve should be listening. He is doing the social impact assessment, so it's definitely something that both the social impact and the marine impact can take into consideration in the next phase. So thank you for that. It's something that we will definitely pass on. It is something that has been considered more or less, but I think the pointedness of your suggestion is very valid. So we'll forward that on. And then the last one was, data for today. I can do that. I can do data for today. Sorry, we have meetings all night, every week, every night this week. So my head's a little bit full of answers. So they are looking at building a facility next door to Coburg, because that is the Dana-Fontaine site that was authorized in 2017. But they are looking for another site. Okay.
Thank you. Gentleman with the red shirt, thank you very much for your patience, sir.
Hi, my name is Neil. If you think about it, when Coburg was built 40 years ago, there was no solar. Didn't exist. How many people here in this room have got solar panels on their roof? Put up your hands. So things have changed. Things have moved on. The cost of producing power at Coburg now is, I stand to be corrected, but it's 148 a kilowatt. The latest bid window for solar came in at 46 cents a kilowatt. All we know is that nuclear power has become more and more expensive. Whatever they're going to quote for this bill, it's going to cost double and it's going to take twice as long. You lock into that for 10 years. Solar can be built quickly and efficiently, and the costs are going down all the time. I know it's about baseload, but that problem is being solved. Ask Elon Musk. You can build batteries now for a fraction of the cost that you used to. Things are changing. Things have moved on. It's 40 years ago we were thinking of nuclear. We shouldn't be considering it now at all.
Thank you. I'll take that. That lady.
Like 14 van die mense van die tyd Oorstraat het so pas vir ons laat weet dat ons begroting met hoeveel persentasie tariewe op is. Hierdie tariewe is op geskryf. En die rede daarvoor is dat al ons fasiliteite oud is en nie groot genoeg is nie en moet begroot word en moet verander word omdat Gansbaai teen 1.8% groei per jaar aangekoop. Nou ek wil weet hoeveel mense sal moet inkom na Bandamsklip toe as hierdie projek voortgaan.
Dankie. Ek gaan daai vraag vat as 'n vraag wat ons in die impakstudiefase sal antwoord, want dit is 'n ondersoek wat deur die Social Impact Assessment studie beantwoord kan word. Baie dankie. Die dame, ek sien, was jou aan eet of die ander een? Ek dink ons gaan eers met jou en dan die dame wat daar agter sit by die paal, by die pilaar.
I'm Patricia, and I'm a Gansbaai resident, and I now have more questions at the end of the evening than I had at the beginning.
It's a good thing.
I'm only going to ask one question, and that is it true that by law, as far as this whole process is going, is it true by law that the project can only go ahead once all of the public's questions have been answered with regards to the environmental impact study? It's actually a deeper question than that, but I think you get the gist of my question. So all these studies that are being done by the experts for you, as long as we have questions for them to answer, the project can't go here until all those questions are answered. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm going to ask Ash to respond to that.
You are going to fall on your head. We have a health and safety moment here with this Kelly. Okay, so it's not quite like that. Okay, there will always be questions. Okay, and that is a never-ending story. So if we were to wait until there were literally no more questions to be asked, no project, not even this one, let alone any other project, would be finished. So what we do have to do in terms of the regulations is that every question that we receive within the time frames of the process, we have to respond to. Okay? So there's a difference. Okay? We will never stop getting questions. Whether it be a nuclear project, a sewage facility project, a wind facility project, and let me tell you, those are controversial, believe it or not, okay? Solar, it doesn't matter what it is, a mining project, we will never stop getting questions. But what we do have to do in terms of the regulations is every comment that we receive, within the time frames that have been provided in terms of the public review, so in terms of this scoping report, the comments that we receive and the questions that we receive between the 1st of April and the 5th of May, we have to respond to, and they have to be included in the final scoping report that goes to the DFFE. The process is still open for comments to come in from the 6th of May, right up until the end of the review period for the EIA phase. You can still submit comments between the scoping phase and before the EIA phase starts. We will collect them all, we will respond to them all. But once we have submitted that final report, even then, ILAPs can submit comments, except they then CC the EP and send them straight to the DFFE. But in terms of the comments that we receive from the 1st of April to the date that we end the public review for the EIA phase, we have to capture all those comments and respond to them. So in that, yes, we do have to respond to all of those, but not as long as there are questions, because that will never end. Okay.
Thank you. Right, so you're coming back. I think this gentleman here.
Ons wil net maar praat. Ek wil net weet die kraglyne wat julle wil bou of moet bou om die kraglyne wat julle moet bou of moet bou om die krag weg te lei. Ek dink dit moet saam met die EIA van die dinges van die stasie gedoen word. Want dit dink volgens my dat 'n groter impak het, daai voetspore oor die werke gaan, oor die plase gaan, dit gaan klein plasies onekonomies eenhede maak. As huise in die pad van julle voorgestelde vorige kere waar die kraglyne gaan loop. Dit is my groter risiko. Ek is boer wat daar is. Ek dink dit gaan baie groter impak hê op my en op my grond. Die stasie is aan een kant. So dit is al wat ek is.
Baie dankie. Ons vat daai kommentaar, ons het dit genoteer. Soos wat ons vroeër gesê het, sluit hierdie omgewingsimpakstudie nie die transmissielyne in nie, maar ons noteer dit en ons gaan die final scoping report dienooreenkomstig aanpas met daardie kommentaar. Baie dankie.
Goed, ek is ook 'n inwoner van Gansbaai. Ek het baie vrae gehad, ek dink redelik baie is geantwoord. Ek dink ons het 'n trust issue met ons regering kos om die installasie te bou?
Wat kost dit om die stasie te bou? Ek dink die vraag is reeds vroeër vanaand geantwoord. Eskom is nie seker op hierdie stadium nie en hulle wil ook nie spekuleer oor die antwoord nie. So daar is aparte regulatoriese prosesse wat gevolg word in terme van finansiële kostes, procurement, the separate processes that need to run, and they will be run according to the relevant legislation and in collaboration with the Department of Treasury. That component does not form part of the EIA. So I think Eskom will share that information when they are ready. Thank you.
We don't know until we go out to We don't know what the cost will be until we go out on request for proposals for the power plant. So, we don't want to give you a number because we actually could have a range of numbers, but we don't actually know until we go out for a request for proposal and we get the proposals in that say it's going to cost X amount. There are costs in the integrated resource plan, which looks at all your energy mix, looks at what solar costs, looks at what wind costs, looks how solar contributes to the energy mix, looks how nuclear and base load would contribute, how are we going to make sure that when 8 gigawatts of coal is switched off, what do we replace it with? Would the renewable technologies be enough? The integrated resource plan, which was also a public document, which also had public input, is available for you to look into, and that has a schedule of costs, or has used a schedule of costs to put the plan together. And part of the integrated resource plan says we need 5,200 megawatts of nuclear, as well as renewables and gas, pump storage schemes, and so on. Thanks.
Thank you. I just also want to say it depends approval of the project. So until the project has been, the EIA has received environmental authorization with other associated environmental permits and authorizations, that answer will remain unanswered. I have one more question. Sorry, I just have to go to the other people. Okay, I'm going to take 3 more questions, then we need to wrap up. Thank you.
My name is Richard Pennell. I'm an adjacent landowner. Eskom actually bought some of our farm in 1987, 88, somewhere around there. I just want to put on record a conversation that I had with one of the geologists that did the report in 1987. There was a team of people, there was sociologists and hydrologists from others. And the one geologist said to me, a senior man, there is a geological fault that runs from Montague directly to Buntilton Cliff. And I said to him, I was surprised. And I said, well, if that's the case, what are you doing here? He said, well, it's not the end of the story because they could always engineer it to secure the site despite the fault. So my question is, and it's not one that I expect you to be able to answer, but I wish to record it. Was he telling the truth?
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that?
I'm not sure who the geologists are that you're referring to, and I cannot comment on whether you told the truth or not. But what I can comment is we have not yet conducted the seismic analysis for the Bantusco site. So, the seismic analysis still needs to be done. And we have not done it to the latest standard that we've done. We've completed the seismic hazard analysis process for well placement and then the dam. It's quite intense, it's quite a lot of work that needs to go in there, and that's part of the decision of why the preference currently needs to go with what the EAP has suggested for placement. still a lot of geological work that needs to be done for funded scope in terms of the seismic hazard analysis process that we follow. We have not done that yet, or concluded on that yet for funded scope as such. So I cannot comment on that statement without knowing the detail in terms of what is done and what reference they're referring to for that work.
If you have more information, we would appreciate sharing or reference to that information so that we can pass that on to the specialists. Thank you very much. That was the first question of the last three. I think there was the question, and then there's one more. That gentleman. I think the one with the blue shirt. We need to wrap this up. So. Last comment.
Hello. My name is Donda. Is there a study, or have you taken into consideration in your planning, your study, the procurement plan is likely for this project? And by that I mean the inputs of various people. What extent of the labour, how much could it be on site, is it going to be design and construct, or all those various components, because I believe that's going to have an impact on the environment in the longer term, in the bigger picture. I spent 9 years on proceeding, and I'm still standing, but I can tell you everything that I seem to have got involved in had a huge involvement. And it prolonged that contract, and it's still not complete. I don't want to go too much into that, except to say that if we think this is going to be built at a time that, I think the gentleman raised that point earlier, we're in for a big shock. From the labour side, from the procurement, and I don't want to even mention the incredible expense. The UP, I think, was similar. So, while we have to move ahead, things have to be built. It's how we're going to do it and manage the problems that we have. And it's serious, because we don't want to be sitting here with a power station that after 5 years it hasn't got anywhere. All those kind of problems that we experienced and still experiencing is still not resolved. So all I'm saying is it in your plan to, or have you looked at the impact that could have on the environment?
Thank you. I'm going to ask
I will need to look at that. It's very possible that the economic study will look into that. It will definitely pass that comment on to them. But I think also, Sidika, there's probably more planning on those sort of procurement, etc., being done on Eskom side. But I will also make sure that comment gets to our economic specialists so they can have a look at that. Okay, because at the moment I definitely can't give you a definite answer, but Sidika can give you more from the Eskom side.
Thanks. And I'm not going to prejudge the outcome of what they need to do, because that's an opinion. What I can comment on is the fact that we have looked at what's gone wrong at Presumably, what's gone wrong at Proceeding, and factored that into our planning for what we do not want to repeat for this procurement. Okay, I'll repeat that. We have looked at the experiences and the lessons learned from what has happened at Medupi Proceeding in terms of those projects, and have taken those into account in our planning for the procurement to follow in terms of this process going forward. What's critical for us is that we do not want to repeat the same mistakes. We pride ourselves in the industry that we do learn from the experiences that our forerunners has taught us, and to make sure that we don't go into that. So key items like project labor agreements needs to be entered into. That was a critical failure that led us into some problems at Medupi. There were issues around food and catering facilities, as an example, that we need to make sure is appropriately set up for the procurement process that we're going to go for, and look at all those intricacies that goes around project labor agreements that would be required, engaging with the trade unions to bring them on board in managing those items, and having a consolidated plan and take all of that into account in this for the success of the project. So we're looking at all of those factors to learn from what we need to take into account in the procurement process that will unfold. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give this lady an opportunity. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Kay. I have a question of concern. Would the residents be purchasing electricity directly from Eskom, or would they still be purchasing from the municipality? Firstly. Secondly, if it's directly from Eskom, how is it going to affect the municipality moving forward and their income to sustain the infrastructure that we have up here?
Thank you. Sadiqa,
already who distributes the electricity and who you pay to is basically determined. So there's some areas that Eskom already supplies and we pay them directly. I pay them directly because in my area that's so. Sadiqa pays the municipality. So it wouldn't change. Building a power station here would not change how distribution and who charges for the distribution and who you pay for.
Thank you. That lady there in the back. That's our last question for tonight.
Hi, sorry for keeping you all. I'm Lorraine. My interests are environmental, marine, kind of related, but I'm sure my question applies to whatever section. So as obviously in your report you have the risks, and then you very nicely downgraded most of the risks with your mitigation measures, which are lovely on a piece of paper, but realistically how are you going to ensure that that mitigation is carried through? For example, one that I looked at was the cormorant breeding. During breeding season, you said it's a no-go zone. I can tell you from my experience, that's a joke. You will not control that. So how do you ensure your mitigation measures?
Thank you.
Okay, so just in general, the mitigation measures are at the moment preliminary. Okay, they all have to be practical and implementable. They are all, once we get into the next phase in terms of the EIA, they all go into what we call environmental management plan. The environmental management plan becomes part, it becomes an approved document as part of the authorization. However, the DFFE can actually decide to not approve the EMP until closer to the date of construction, when the EMP then has to be re-evaluated, re-looked at, updated when necessary, and re-put out for public comment. It will be a document that goes out for public comment next phase. And once it is approved, it becomes a legal document. Okay? And it becomes auditable by an independent environmental control officer during construction and during operation. So does the EA. The environmental authorization is also an auditable document and normally audited once a year, along with the EMP. The EMP, in terms of the construction phase, would require, say, an ECO on site every day, as well as an independent ECO that goes through and audits their documents at least once a month to make sure that all the relevant construction mitigations are being implemented as required. So it does become an auditable document going forward. It is a document that becomes that lives the life of the project and is able to be updated as things change and move forward. So if an auditor comes in and audits the EMP and says, well, actually this mitigation measure should be changed in this manner to better serve its purpose, then an EMP condition or mitigation measure can be updated, and then an approval process is run through with the DFFE. So it's a very important document that needs to be written in the next phase. And we have to be very careful that we don't put in mitigation measures that actually can't be done. Okay, so the specialists have to make sure that what they suggest is an implementable thing. And if there, for example, is a breeding season no-go period, and they can't do any construction during that period, an auditor will be able to audit that and make sure that it is actually happening. So it does become a very important document later. Okay.
Thank you. From a practical perspective, just on other projects where there were a lot of distrust in the country, some of the recommendations of the EAPs and the environmental practitioners were that environmental monitoring committees are established. I know that is the case for a lot of wood use license processes, where you then have the public that can form part of such a committee to also check and monitor whether that goals are achieved in terms of mitigation measures. Yeah. So, is that a closing comment?
Sorry, I did ask a question. Sorry, I know you finished. Most of my questions have been answered. That's why I didn't push it too much. But I've got a question that's puzzling me. It's taken 10 years for the process prior to this. But now there are time frames. Why all of a sudden time frames that would go like that? Where it's taken, the process has taken so long, and as the gentleman mentioned, all those processes have expired. So why now? How are you going to catch up 10 years info in the time frame that you put yourself now? And then the ladies mentioned that in 2030 they're going to stop coal, but the gentleman mentioned in 2039 they will have the nuclear power station. So what's going to happen between 2030 and 2039? Is there going to be power? And and the costs. The funding, I feel it's going to be about vendors, but in the meanwhile, electricity goes up and up and up. Is it to supply electricity to the expanding grid, or is it also going to benefit the current electricity users? Because most electricity users have gone to alternate methods. So also Eskom's grid is not under as much pressure as what it was previously, because most of the users are now using solar, they're using other types of electricity. So, that's my question, sorry.
No, that's fine. Right, thank you. Ash, I'm going to ask you to respond to the time frame questions and how we will be able to catch up 10 years of work in such a short time frame.
So we're not catching up work, we're doing a new study. So the reason why the previous EIA took so long was because there were no time frames. So when we had, there were, I remember from the outside looking in, because I wasn't involved in that process, but there were many requests from stakeholders to have very long periods of review. The department themselves took very long to review documents, so Eskom could wait a year or a year and a half before they received the next decision from the department. So it's not a time frame that we've put ourselves into. The time frames were decided by government and put into the EIA regulations in 2014. We've been working with these time frames on all EIAs that need to happen across the country, whatever the project might be, since 2014. So we've had to adapt as EAPS since 2014 to be able to do these studies in the time frames required. Often we get the specialists to start their studies a lot earlier. For example, renewable facilities, solar and wind, they need 12 months worth of back monitoring, and they need to, that information is in the file, it has to be in the draft EIA reports. So we've had to get specialists going way before EIAs even get kicked off, because there's not enough time in the process to do the amounts of study that is required by other guidelines, for example. So we've had to adapt to those time frames as we've gone. So let me tell you, I would love, the client doesn't want to hear this, but I would love for the fact if we had some extra time, because literally we'll have like 8 days to finalize the scoping report before we have to submit it to the department. So we're going to be working through the night for 2 weeks to try and get that document done. So it's insane. But so how I would love to have some extra time. But we have to adapt, we have to do it in the time frame, otherwise the whole process, if we miss a date, then the process lapses and we have to start all over again. So we just have to do what we need to do.
Thank you. And then will there be security of power supply between 2030 and 2039 when the coal power stations are decommissioned and before the nuclear come online?
According to the Integrated Resource Plan, yes, there's lots of renewables coming on. There's 8 gigawatts of baseload going off, and we're going to have to work really hard to balance the system. But then in 2036, there's another 2 power stations shutting down. I think if you put them together, they're probably another 2 gigawatts, or no, actually probably another 4 gigawatts. And then the stations that are operating post 2035, they start shutting down in 2040, 2042, 2044. So basically, you will only have Kusile and GP left after around 20, my dates might not be exact, around 2044, 2045. It's only Majupi and Kusile left. All the other coal plants are off. So there's an incremental process of shutting down coal, and hopefully we are able to manage it. South Africa is able to manage it, because it's not just an Eskom problem.
Thank you very much. I just have one last request. Is there perhaps anyone that can give Uwe a lift to the Kelders? Thank you. Thank you so much. And then I would really like to make use of this opportunity to thank you for your participation, thank you for your attendance. Please feel free to continue to ask questions. The comment period closes on the 5th of May, and you're welcome to submit comments as part of this process until the 5th of May, and then you can continue to submit your questions or your comments that will be considered in the next phase of the impact assessment. Travel safely, and once again, thank you very much. This meeting is closed.
This phone has been renamed.